We were gathered around the long table in the house near Milwaukee, the house I paid for. 10 years together. A milestone, they say. Paper, tin, silver. Anniversaries always come with materials, little symbols for what a marriage is supposed to survive. This one had no symbol. Just a roast, a bottle of wine, and a single sentence that rewrote everything. The night was supposed to feel like something. I wanted it to. I'd spent the day preparing, not because I enjoyed the fuss, but because I hoped the ritual might stitch us together again. Maybe the tablecloth would do what therapy didn't. Maybe buttered rolls and flickering candles would remind them of who fed them. I made the roast 2 days marinating. I cooked the potatoes slow, folded in sour cream and shredded cheese with a pinch of smoked paprika, the way Beth liked them. The wine wasn't cheap. Neither was the cake. From that place Hannah always pointed at through the car window but never entered. I parked out front the day before and walked in with my wallet open. No one asked me why. Her parents came, both worn thin with politeness. Her father, Harold, gave me a single pat on the shoulder like he was signing off a delivery. Her mother smiled too much, the kind of smile people wear when they don't know who they're supposed to thank. A couple friends of Hannah's came late, arriving with store-bought wine and fast compliments about the smell of dinner. I didn't know them well, but they knew me, knew the role, knew what I was. Then there were the girls, Laura and Beth. Her daughters from a man I only knew by his absences. Laura wore red lipstick and her father's jawline. Beth had new glasses and a fresh indifference. Neither of them greeted me, just a nod, like the waiter had finally shown up. I tried not to care. I tried harder than I should admit. We sat. I poured the wine. I made small jokes to fill the air to keep the room soft. I passed plates like a host. I made sure Harold's glass stayed full, and I laughed when no one else did. I was raising my glass, 10 years. A toast. Nothing poetic, just something true. I thought maybe it would land. Maybe someone would lift their eyes. Maybe the word family wouldn't feel borrowed. That's when Hannah said it. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even look at me when she said it. When it comes to the girls, I make all the decisions. Flat, cold, like a receipt left on the counter. I don't remember what I was going to say before she interrupted me. I don't remember because the words I had planned dissolved the moment hers landed. My hand stopped midair. The glass hovered, unspilled, a little monument to a man who thought he belonged. Laura smiled, just slightly. A corner of the mouth smirk that said, "You heard her." Beth gave a soft nod, like she was marking a box on a form. Her friends blinked, but no one spoke. Harold shifted in his chair but never made eye contact. Her mother said something about how lovely the roast was. The air didn't move. That was it. No one defended me. No one even acknowledged the sentence. They all heard it. Every person at that table knew what had just been said. And every one of them chose silence. That silence was the verdict. That silence told me everything. I looked down at my plate. I carved the roast evenly. Their portions were perfect. I'd counted calories for them. I remembered Laura's gluten thing. I remembered Beth's dentist appointment. I remembered the date of every test, every choir performance, every scraped knee they never thanked me for tending. I was the man who paid, the one who drove, the one who stayed up when they were sick, the one who held umbrellas over their heads when the other one, the real one, the one who gave them their names, couldn't even be bothered to call. I folded my napkin, not quickly, slowly, deliberately, set it down beside the plate. My fork was still warm. I stood. No dramatics. No clearing of the throat. I didn't push my chair back hard, didn't break the spell with sound. I didn't look at anyone directly, but I saw them all. The way Laura leaned back, the way Beth blinked too slowly, the way Hannah stayed looking straight ahead like she hadn't just rewritten our entire history in one breath. I took my coat from the hook near the door. My hands didn't shake. I zipped it all the way up. It was cold outside. Snow coming. I'd seen the forecast earlier that day while checking the power bill. The bill was paid. Of course it was. I paid it. I turned back once. Just once. One glance over my shoulder. Nobody moved. And then I left. I closed the door gently behind me, like I was stepping out for air. But I wasn't. I never sat at that table again. I didn't leave town. I didn't even leave the neighborhood. I walked down the street to the motel I passed every day on the way to work, the one with the flickering sign and bad coffee. The front desk clerk didn't ask questions. I paid in cash. Just one night, I said. I stayed a week. The first thing I did was open my laptop. I logged into every account that had my name tied to their lives. Beth's college rent, canceled. Laura's phone plan, locked. The studio transfer Hannah's brother needed every month. Deleted. The joint account I'd signed for, the one I funded quietly without ceremony, I removed my signature from that too. No rage. No regret. Just quiet clicks. When I was done, I closed the laptop and sat by the window. The motel room smelled like bleach and old smoke. I poured myself a glass of water from the bathroom tap and drank it slowly. Then I sat. I didn't turn on the TV. By morning, the house was silent. They didn't know it yet, but everything had already changed. The power hadn't been cut, not literally. But nothing was moving anymore. The engine that made their lives hum had stepped away from the wheel. There were no calls that first night. No texts. Not even a "where are you?" That was the part that told me I'd made the right choice. I thought about the table. I thought about how no one said a word after she said it. 10 years and not a single voice rose in my defense. Not her parents, not her friends, not even the girls. Especially not the girls. They didn't flinch because they already believed it. It wasn't just a sentence. It was a truth they'd been living, finally spoken aloud. They had never seen me as theirs, only as useful. I wasn't a father. I was a fixture, a silent engine they never thanked but always counted on. Now the engine was off, and they were going to find out what silence really sounded like. The silence didn't come all at once. Crept. By noon the next day, I was still in the motel. I hadn't turned on the TV. The window gave me everything I needed. A view of my house from a block away, its familiar outline now distant, like a place I used to live in another life. The curtains were drawn. The driveway was empty. Snow gathered at the edges of the walkway where I used to shovel every morning like clockwork. I knew the furnace was running. I'd paid the bill before I left. One last favor. The messages began not with panic, but with confusion. Beth, first. Mom's rent didn't go through. Is something wrong with the card? Simple. Casual. She didn't say hello. Then Laura. I tried ordering something. Phone says account's locked. Can you fix it? No warmth. No hesitation. Just the assumption that I'd fix it. Then Hannah. The internet's down. Can you call someone? That was the one that made me laugh. A soft, humorless sound. After 10 years, she still expected me to be on hold with the provider while she stood in the kitchen pretending not to hear the music I kept inside me. The music of things falling apart. I didn't respond to any of them. Not because I wanted to hurt them. That would have meant I still expected something from them. I didn't. I sat by the window, held a mug of motel coffee gone cold, and watched the world without me. They weren't grieving. They were scrambling. That's the difference. Grief carries weight. Scrambling is just fear wearing shoes. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about the scaffolding I'd built suddenly being gone. The payments, the passwords, the quiet systems that held their lives up like invisible beams. That's not love. That's dependency. And I'd stopped being a supply line. By late afternoon, the knocks came. I heard the footsteps before I saw the figure. Light, cautious. Not angry. Not yet. Hannah. She stood outside the door to the motel room like she was looking at something she hadn't planned on ever seeing. Like seeing me here made it real. Like motel rooms were for men who'd given up, not for the one who built her kitchen. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. She stood there in her coat, hair tied back in that familiar, effortless way she always used when she wanted to seem composed. Her hands were buried deep in her pockets. "You're serious?" she asked. I looked at her, not past her, at her. About what? Walking out. Over one sentence. I almost smiled. Almost. That wasn't one sentence, Hannah. That was the truth. Said out loud. She hesitated, eyes scanning the hallway like someone might save her from the silence that followed. But no one came. No one ever comes when it's about men like me, the ones who hold everything quietly, until we don't. I stepped aside. Not for her. Just to get my coat. She didn't follow me in. Come on, she said. Her voice soft now. You know I didn't mean it like that. I zipped up the coat. Didn't you? She shook her head, but it wasn't an answer. It was a habit, a gesture, something she did when she didn't have the words. I make all the decisions. I said the words slowly. That's what you said. Right in front of them. She looked away. Do you know what that told me? She didn't answer. It told me I was never part of the equation. Not as a parent. Not as a man. Just a utility. Plug in the wall. Flip the switch. Lights come on. Money shows up, food gets bought. Car gets fixed. Bills get paid. Still nothing. No denial. Because she knew. Tell me, I asked calmly. When was the last time you introduced me as their father? Or even just said, he matters too? Her lips parted, but the answer didn't come. Because the truth doesn't need a script. It just waits. You don't have to say anything, I told her. I already know. They saw you say it. And they smiled. The moment stretched. The silence between us was no longer soft. It was steel. Thin, sharp, permanent. Finally, she turned to leave. Is this about punishing them? She asked over her shoulder. No, I said. It's about no longer punishing myself. The door closed behind her. I didn't watch her walk away. That night, the calls stopped. The questions stopped. It shifted. They thought silence was a strategy. But they didn't know that silence is where I live. Where men like me have always lived. They wanted to see if I'd fold. If the motel walls would remind me of how empty life could feel. But they didn't understand. I'd been alone long before I left the house. It's one thing to be unloved. It's another thing entirely to be needed but unseen. For 10 years I made the machine run. They liked the hum. But they never once opened the hood. Never once looked at the man bleeding under the surface. I let them run out of comfort. By morning, Laura couldn't get into her campus building. The digital pass was linked to a payment plan I'd set up quietly after her second missed exam. The university had frozen her access. Beth couldn't call a car. Her ride app was tied to a credit card that no longer worked. She texted 3 times that day. All short. All urgent. Are you doing this on purpose? I really need help. Please don't make this harder. Still no hi. No, how are you? No, we were wrong. Just panic. The same panic that comes when a bridge disappears beneath your feet mid-step. I sat in the motel room, eating leftover takeout with a plastic fork, watching the snow gather outside. The house was a block away, close enough to return to, but it might as well have been another country. I'd left more than the dinner table. Hannah called again that evening. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. They get it now, she said. They're scared. Come back. We need to talk. I sipped my coffee. Now you want to talk? Yes. I didn't answer right away. She kept going. They're realizing things. They didn't know how much you did. I could hear the strain in her voice, like she was trying to sell me back my own worth. But I wasn't buying. The time to talk was at that dinner table, I said. When you said it. When they smiled. That was the moment. You didn't talk then. Silence. They were just kids, she said finally. So was I replied. Once. And no one caught me either. I ended the call. I packed a small bag that night. Not to leave town, just to prepare. The next day, I walked to the house when I knew no one would be home. I still had a key. I let myself in. I didn't touch anything that wasn't mine. Suits, charger, passport, tools I'd bought, because no one else ever thought to fix the loose cabinet or the door that squeaked in the winter. I didn't leave a note. I didn't leave a mess. I took what belonged to me and nothing else. When I stepped back outside, Hannah was standing on the porch. I don't know how long she'd been there. She didn't speak. Neither did I. We stood in the cold, a foot of distance that may as well have been a canyon. Her arms were crossed. Not to stay warm, to keep something in. I walked past her. She didn't follow. That was the moment I knew I was already gone. Not leaving, gone. I'd been the man who paid, who fixed, who carried. I was the man they leaned on, but not the man they saw. And now I was the man who had stopped. Stopped paying. Stopped showing up. Stopped explaining what should never have needed to be explained. They could take it as loss. Or as freedom. Either way, I wouldn't be there to interpret it. I'd made my choice. The next morning, I watched the sun come up over Milwaukee through the narrow motel window. It split through the blinds in slats across the floor. I hadn't slept. Not really. Just dozed in and out. The kind of sleep you take in small, bitter sips like coffee gone cold. That's how it is when you're shedding a life. They still hadn't called again. Not that day. Not yet. They thought it was a standoff. A man sulking in a cheap room, waiting to be begged back. They didn't understand what had changed. You don't beg a man back after you've erased him. You mourn him, or you replace him. But you don't call it a misunderstanding. Because what happened wasn't a fight. It was a revelation. And revelations don't get undone with apologies, especially when they never come. But consequences, those arrive right on schedule. Beth's name showed up on my phone again. A name I used to see attached to school emails, medication reminders, online orders I placed because she forgot. The girl I stayed up with through math breakdowns, through heartbreaks, through silent Sundays when she locked herself in her room and I knocked, just once, and left a glass of water outside her door. My student ID won't work. They froze me out of the library. I can't even print my paper. Did you cancel something? Then, 20 minutes later, please just tell me what I did. This isn't fair. The second one stung more than the first. What I did. As if it were new. As if the years didn't count. As if it had only been a few days of tension and not a decade of slow burial. Laura came next. I just got a call from the housing office. The rent didn't clear. Mom's panicking. Why are you doing this? Not are you okay? Not we're sorry. Just panic in the shape of entitlement. They thought the world had hiccuped. They didn't realize the man who wasn't their father had been holding the bottom up this whole time. They thought the net was built into the floor. And now the floor had holes. That afternoon, Hannah tried again. I let it ring twice, then answered. She's locked out, she said. No greeting. No softness. Just a voice frayed at the edges. Beth can't get into her class building. Laura's crying. They don't know what's going on. They know, I said. She paused. You made your point. No, I said quietly. They're just starting to see the point. The call ended. No goodbye. That evening, I walked 2 blocks to a diner. Ate a grilled cheese and soup, watched a TV with no sound. The world kept turning. Cars passed. Waitresses refilled cups. Music played softly from a cracked speaker in the corner. None of it asked anything of me. That night, I slept harder than I had in months. The next day, I received a new kind of message. Short. Hesitant. Like she didn't want me to know she'd been told to send it. Laura again. I know things were tense. I didn't mean to disrespect you. I was just trying to support Mom. We didn't know you were that upset. I didn't reply, because I had told myself this. If they ever wrote to me, it had to be real. It had to cost them something. Not just comfort. Not just convenience. But pride. This wasn't pride on my part. This was clarity. The man they erased was gone. And the one who remained, me, I wasn't interested in being patched back into their system just to get spit out again when it suited them. By Thursday, Hannah had stopped texting. She must have realized that the real cost wasn't me leaving. It was me not coming back. Not for dinner. Not for bills. Not for birthdays. Not for graduation speeches I'd once rehearsed in my head. Picturing them sitting in rows with their caps slightly tilted. Me in the back, clapping louder than anyone else. I never wanted a medal. Just a seat. But I'd been standing the whole time, unnoticed. Now I'd sat down. And they didn't know what to do. On Friday, I returned to the house for the last time. Not to talk. Not to explain. Just to retrieve what was mine. It was early afternoon. I waited until the driveway was empty. I still had a key. The inside was clean. Silent. like it had been scrubbed to erase any trace of my absence. But it couldn't, because the house felt different, dead almost, like it knew. I moved through the rooms like a stranger, not carefully, not in a rush, just detached. I collected my suits, the ones no one ever complimented. My tools, my files, my spare charger, passport, emergency documents. I left the photos, all of them. One sat by the hallway mirror. A Christmas years ago, with Beth wearing my scarf and Laura holding the dog I'd picked out for her 8th birthday. I stared at it for a moment. No frame is heavy until the face inside forgets yours. I left it behind. As I stepped out, Hannah was on the porch again. Same spot, same posture, like she'd been cast in stone and hadn't moved since our last encounter. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her hands were buried in her sleeves. It wasn't that cold. We looked at each other. Not long, just long enough for her to know. The man who had carried her family on his back was done pretending he wasn't limping. I didn't stop, didn't speak. When I reached the edge of the walkway, she whispered something. I couldn't hear it. I didn't want to. There are some sounds that only hurt when you turn around. I kept walking. That night, the motel clerk asked if I'd be extending. I told him no. The next place was smaller, out of town. A friend's cabin. No rent, just quiet. I packed what I needed and left before sunrise. That week, the silence shifted again. No more confusion. No more polite panic. Just desperation. Beth wrote, "I'm drowning." I didn't understand. Please, I was wrong. Then, hours later, "Even if you don't forgive us, just tell me what to do. I'll do it." And Laura, 2 days after that, "You mattered. We were too stupid to see it. Please come home." But realization doesn't restore what was never protected. Respect isn't something you give once the money's gone. It's something you give before the meal's cooked, before the lights are on, before the check clears. I didn't reply, not out of revenge, but because this wasn't about payment. This was about worth. For years I showed up. Every holiday, every meltdown, every late-night run for flu meds, every school fee they couldn't pronounce. And the one time I stood up for myself, they called it a tantrum. No, I wasn't the one throwing a fit. They were. Now that the ATM had grown a spine. By week's end, I was unpacked at the cabin. The trees creaked at night. The air was cleaner. The quiet was heavier, but not cruel. Felt like truth. I drank my coffee slowly, cooked what I wanted, wore sweaters with holes in them because no one was there to judge me. It didn't feel like revenge. Felt like rest. They could call it abandonment, call it betrayal, call it whatever word helped them sleep. But I hadn't left a family. I'd left a setup, a structure built on convenience, not respect, a machine that hummed on my labor, never once acknowledging the man inside the engine room. So when I cut the wires, everything went dark. And they called that cruelty. But tell me, was it? Or was it finally honest? A week passed. The snow fell heavier now. Thick, slow flakes that muffled sound and made the world seem quieter than it already was. The cabin I'd borrowed sat on a ridge, surrounded by trees stripped bare, their limbs like old hands reaching toward a sky too far gone to care. I spent the mornings reading, the afternoons walking, the nights thinking, not about them, not anymore. Not about the girls who once rolled their eyes when I reminded them to turn off the lights, who couldn't say thank you without being prompted, who never asked how much it cost. The braces, the books, the doctor's visits I waited outside of, the field trips I paid for twice because they lost the forms. Not about Hannah either. She was quieter in my mind now. The memory of her voice like a song I used to love and no longer recognized. I remembered how she'd sleep facing the window, back turned. Even on nights I came home bruised from double shifts and still folded the laundry. I remembered how her silence wasn't absence. It was permission. A slow approval of the way I was edged out, foot by foot, until I was funding a life that didn't include me. No, I didn't think about them. I thought about me. For the first time in years. And then the phone rang. Blocked number. I don't know why I answered. But I did. It was Laura. Her voice was low. Not cracked, not theatrical. Just small. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, she said. I didn't respond. I just wanted to say, I get it now. Not just the money. Everything. The rides. The doctor's visits. The time you came to that choir concert and didn't tell me so I wouldn't feel weird. She paused. I know you were always there, even when we didn't ask you to be. Still, I didn't speak. Because words, once used against you, sound thin when they come back too late. I was a kid, she said. But being a kid isn't an excuse for being cruel. I almost said something then. Almost told her that it wasn't cruelty. Not exactly. It was ignorance. But then again, what's the difference when it drains you all the same? I'm sorry, she whispered. And for the first time in all the years I knew her, it sounded real. But real or not, it didn't undo the truth. You never called me Dad, I said. She went silent. That was your choice, I continued. Not mine. And I lived with it. I didn't need the word, but I needed the respect. And when your mother said what she said, you smiled. I know, she said. That's the part one hate the most. Then why did you do it? I wanted to ask, but I already knew the answer. Because when the world gives you comfort, you don't stop to ask who's carrying it. I let the silence stretch. You don't have to forgive me, she said. I just wanted to tell you that I see it now, and I'm sorry. She hung up before I could say anything else. 2 days later, Beth wrote. Not a message. A letter. Actual paper. It arrived at the cabin in an envelope with my name spelled correctly. Something she never used to do. Her handwriting was shaky. I unfolded it slowly, expecting it to unravel me. Didn't. It read, You used to pick me up from debate club, even when I didn't talk the whole ride home. I thought you were doing it because Mom told you to. I never knew you volunteered. I never knew you had to shift work just to make it happen. I didn't see it then. I see it now. You were there when Dad wasn't. And I treated you like a placeholder. You weren't. I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say, except I hope you're okay. I hope someone is looking after you the way you looked after all of us. And I hope you know we were wrong. Love, Beth. I folded it and placed it in a drawer. Not because I forgave her, but because it meant something. It meant they'd beg *N to learn the lesson. You don't get to keep a man's labor and deny him his presence. You don't get to laugh at his absence of authority while living on his presence of effort. And when that man walks away, you don't get to call him cruel. You get to ask yourself what made him leave. Not slam doors, not pack bags. Just leave emotionally, financially, spiritually. Because one day, a man who's spent years being nothing but dependable will realize he's nothing but depended on. And the second he removes the weight of himself, you feel it. Not because he was loud, but because the quiet he leaves behind is different than the quiet he lived in. They felt that silence. It wasn't revenge. It was a mirror. And in it, they saw what I had been all along. The man who held everything together with invisible thread. Not the father by blood, but the man who showed up, paid up, waited, stood behind the scenes and applauded their lives while his was quietly dying. Now I don't applaud. I don't pay. I don't wait. I live. Small, quiet, honest. And if they ever find me again, not just the girls, but Hannah too, if they ever stand on another porch, teary-eyed, voices full of words they should have said years ago, I won't be cruel, but I'll be clear. I gave everything. They gave nothing back. And love without respect is servitude. So I'll ask you, anyone who hears this, anyone who's been where I've been, was I wrong? Was I wrong to finally choose myself? Was I cruel to pull back what was mine? Or was I simply done pretending that sacrifice without acknowledgement was the same as love? You tell me, because they never did. And maybe that's the lesson they still have to learn.